Now we're moving up and we've departed. This is Cajon Pass, one of the many locations where people were just everywhere. And as part of the planning process, the gentleman right here on the left is Bob Brinza. He runs the BNSF. So it was my plan to coordinate very closely with him, and how best to do that is to have him in the engine with us. So should there be any problems at all, should we experience a situation where we have to stop or we encounter anything, he's right there and we can react to do what we have to do to keep our respective railroads fluid. Again, a lot of planning went into place. Excellent. We've enjoyed a very good relationship with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. We've operated on their routes many times, and they're a great organization to work with. Coming into Victorville, lots and lots of people. Now we've kind of settled into a little bit of a routine. There's still a lot of things we have to do. We have to service the locomotive just like we would if it were in regular service. We've got the connecting rods on, we've got the main rod on, we've got force feed lubrication in our lubricators, we've got the feeds on those lubricators turned up really high, we've got to fill those lubricators, and we've got to service all the rods, and plus conduct the inspections. Several of us, all of us involved in the servicing serves one of the primary responsibilities is that of inspecting the locomotive. Every night when we get in there, we are going to inspect that locomotive from one end to the other, and all the other piece of equipment as well. But our focus is on the steam locomotive, making sure that everything is what it needs to be, nothing is rattling apart, and everything is receiving the proper amount of lubrication. We got a little barbecue grill set up, and you can, through the door, you can see the front of the truck. This is the last car on the train, and this is a plow box car. So we had all the food and our sleeping quarters and shower facilities and everything on the train, and that's standard practice when we travel with the steam locomotive. Most of the crew stays in a hotel. For this journey, we're all staying on board the train. Again, if something happens, we don't know what we're going to have to face, and we don't need the added logistics of trying to bus everybody to and from hotels. So we are going to live 8 days on this thing. So we had all our grills and everything we need. That's Kurt Clark. He's one of our firemen, and he's a pretty good cook too. And this is part of the force feed lubrication on the locomotive, and this is just a picture that I took. One of the things that was completely rebuilt in this particular component, the one it replaced had seized up, so we just replaced it with the part that we brought with us. This photo is credited to Jim Rinn of Trains Magazine. We're very lucky to have had him coming along, documenting it from their perspective, and he was very gracious to provide me with several photos. You can see the train indicator board on the left. It was rather windy coming up through the canyons. Another Jim Rinn photograph. One of the things that we were talking about, that this is going by too quick. We didn't want it. We wanted it to last a long time because it was such a neat experience. Once we got through the anxiety of something bad happening, it was actually rather enjoyable, and just got into a routine of servicing the locomotive and getting some well-needed rest. Now we're up in Moapa. Everywhere we had stopped, we had planned very carefully, just like a regular steam locomotive trip. And we wanted to make our stopping locations accessible to the public, and we wanted to get that information out in advance so people could plan, so they could come out and participate in the move and see the locomotive. This is one of our first stops out of Vegas. The pilot crews that we had were really excited. We operated both of the locomotives. They were both manned, and we had a little briefing sheet up there in the front, taped to the control stand, kind of giving them the do's and the don'ts. And we would go through, and I would job brief each successive crew. We went through 28 crews, and again, that was all planned to be a part of the whole operation. But every time we got a new crew on board, we'd go through our process of letting them know what we do. We've got the the engine in the front, the engine in the back, and the engineer in the front. Don't go beyond 4 throttle, dynamic brake only from the 4884, and I'll coordinate whatever else we got to deal with. Here we go. Have fun. It gives you an idea of the size of the 4000 class locomotive. Very, very massive machine. Another shot coming into Tintic, coming into Salt Lake City. And now we're in Salt Lake City. We enjoyed thousands of people, a great turnout in Salt Lake. Also a little bit of time for the crew to get some rest. And at every display, we plan an additional day. The display day is a display for the public, but it's also an opportunity for us to do what we need to do. If there's anything that needs to be addressed on the locomotive, any parts that need to be adjusted or fabricated, or anything at all, that's an opportunity for us to get that done, so our next series of travel days will go smoothly. Ogden, Utah, very special place for the big boy. There were several retired railroaders and their families that came down and shared some stories with us, very heartwarming. We had an individual that had some hand-drawn paintings and drawings that is his father, who had recently passed away, and he'd worked in the shop. He shared those with us, and that's true when we travel with all the locomotives, the 844, the Challenger. You know, the impact they have on people. It's really, really special for us to be able to do this. Now we're going to make another inspection. This is looking underneath what's known as a cannon box, and that's the roller bearing housing. You can see how clean that plug is, and we've got a series of little chalk marks out there. We've cleaned it and we've checked it, and we continue to inspect it, and every time we inspect it, we go through and we mark it with chalk to know that we've done that. Lubricator lines. These particular lines are the lines that were on the locomotive when it was donated. A vast majority of those lines were still serviceable. Some of them were rotted and we had to replace them. But a very good number of those lines, all we had to do was simply flush them out and go. 4-speed lubricator. See, it's half full on the Cyclass. Is that the one that was on it? Is that one of our rebuilds? That's the original lubricator that was on it. We brought down some cores and a whole bunch of parts. If we had to, we would put our cores and our supply of lubricators from our inventory. We would use those, but we discovered that they were in serviceable condition. We could just clean them up and rehabilitate them. And again, it's a tribute to the design. There's two Railway Locomotive Historical Society members, Paul Gershio and Rick Brown. As part of the plan to move the locomotive back, we would have loved to accommodate all of the membership, but unfortunately we just couldn't do that. And so we left it up to them to determine who they were going to send home with us, and we would take them as far as they want to go. If you want to go all the way home with us, we can do that. We gave them a bunk in our car, and we made arrangements so they could get their have food and everything they needed. And they just melded right into our crew, and they were also really instrumental in the parking lot and in the museum itself, helping us do some very important tasks. So a very good relationship with the organization. And here we have Ted and Austin, probably filling the flange oilers on the engine truck, and we're sitting in the siding letting a double stack go by. And going up Echo Canyon. That was a special day for everyone, especially us. We've been up that canyon a couple of times in the 844, and we're looking forward to taking this locomotive through there under steam. Another beautiful Jim Rinn photograph. Again, you know, every time I look at these, I'm struck with the size of the locomotive. We worked around it a long time. We got comfortable with it, but when we made it a conventional locomotive up to it, we really could see what we had a hold of. And I'll segue off just real quick on that. The very first discussion I ever had, I was invited back to the headquarters, and I was summoned to the top floor of the building. And they got right to the point. Hey, we're considering a big boy. Is that something you would be interested in doing? And, you know, I want to be professional. I want to contain my enthusiasm. But most importantly, this is a very serious line of work that we're in. This isn't a fun, it's always a fun thing. And I wanted to make sure that everybody understood what we were getting ourselves into, what we were committing to, the fuel consumption, the water, the logistics, the grease consumption. And I explained to them, this is two 844s. Think of it in that respect. You've got a 4884. So talk about our water consumption, our fuel consumption, and then we segued off into the very important conversation about infrastructure, and that's going to be our next part of the presentation, is we need infrastructure improvements and expansion to maintain locomotives, not only the big boy, but the 844 and the other locomotives that we have. We're blessed that those that worked in the shop before us were very diligent and very careful to preserve the program through years in which they probably didn't enjoy the support that they would have liked, but they kept the program running, and we owe, our hats are off to them. So the task now falls to us to take it into that next generation. And so the 4014 project was the ideal springboard, the ideal opportunity to discuss what our infrastructure requirements are and what is the STEAM program, what is our mission, what do we do, and how we're going to do it, what resources we're going to need to fulfill that mission. So it took me about 10 minutes to lay that plan out. And then a decision was made that we would proceed with the idea, and I got the order, and I'll never forget that day, go find us a big boy. So here we are. This is at Evanston, Wyoming. Big crowds at Evanston. We had UPH, Union Pacific Historical Society members operating both locomotives.
Wow.
So they were having a great time. Excellent engineers, great to work with. Here we are at the line relocation at Wasatch. Another view, you kind of get the perspective of the locomotive. Just look at the line and how it towers over the diesels and how it towers over the passenger cars. Coming into Green River. Another moment of servicing. And this is the granite quarry. Laramie. That was a very special day as well. They all were. Lots of crowds at Laramie. Unbelievable amount of people. Jim Wren commented to me several times that he couldn't believe how many people were following a locomotive that's not running. Now we're coming into Cheyenne, the moment that we've been thinking about for a long time. We had planned through our corporate communications and our government affairs staff that the mayor of Cheyenne and his wife would like to ride the locomotive into Cheyenne. So 5 weeks prior to this, there's a little bit of pressure when you make a commitment like this, but mayor will pick you up at Wycon, which is a road crossing out there, at 12:45 on May 8th. So weeks later, we travel 1,300 miles, and at 12:44 and 58 seconds, we stopped and picked up the mayor of Cheyenne.
Awesome.
And we equipped him with the company-approved safety equipment, gave him a quick briefing, and he and his wife boarded the locomotive, and into town we went. And there's a shot in the cab. All of us at various points rode there. I rode the locomotive every foot of the way in the event there were issues, and that was kind of our command post to communicate with the dispatcher and to interface with the two locomotive engineers. And it got a little bit cold as soon as we left Green River. Now here we are at home. We've just backed the locomotive into the steam shop.